Good morning. This, July 23rd special school board meeting is called to order. Thank you for joining us this morning. The first thing I'd like to do is invite Mr. Pitts to come forward and kind of do a little overview of our budget, or Mr. Perone.
Well, no, I was quickly going to turn it over to Mr. Pitts. I just wanted to talk about the trim process that we're starting right now, and this is the first piece of it. And so he'll talk about that and the next piece, which is the tentative budget, and that will be at the next meeting. We are not scheduled on the agenda for the workshop, but we would need some time on that, so we're going to have to kind of fit that in. The last thing on your budget book, or the tentative, I just wanted to point out, and I don't believe my folks would tell you that I am a micromanager, but each year Jason always asks me for my approval on the cover, and he did not do that this year, but I believe that is Auburndale High School graduation. And if you don't know, Jason graduated from Auburndale. I think he waited for me to be out one day and he went to Mr. Hill for approval. But anyway, I'll let him go through the facts on our budget.
Good morning. In front of you is a agenda that looks like this with some backup documentation. And that's really the purpose of this morning. Part of the trim process is that we advertise a tentative budget. And so at the end of this little presentation this morning, we're going to ask for a motion to accept the tentative budget and a motion to advertise this Saturday in the Ledger. Unfortunately, this is a lot of boilerplate language, so it's going to be a little boring. I'm going to have to read some of it. The superintendent of schools is required by law to present a proposed budget for the school board's consideration and to request that the school board accept the tentative budget for advertisement on Saturday, July 27th, 2019, for a public hearing on Tuesday, July 30th, 2019 at 5:01 p.m. in the school board auditorium. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the board will be asked to approve the proposed millage rates for certification to the property appraiser and to adopt the tentative budget. The property appraiser's office will in turn mail the trim notices informing Polk County taxpayers of the millage levies being considered and the time scheduled for the final budget hearing, which is September 3rd, 2019 at 5:01 p.m. And the following support documentation is provided. So if you'll flip over to page number 2. This is the budget summary that will be advertised in the paper on Saturday. And when I say that this is tentative, this is extremely tentative. So this is a summary of all of our major funds. The required local effort has been reduced down to 3.838, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. General fund right now is estimated to be $921,789,746 million. I wanted to also highlight capital projects. As you know, we bonded for new school construction. So when you look at the capital projects fund, you'll notice that we have a $308 million fund balance in there. That bonding pushed us to a final overall budget of $1.7 billion. Last year we were at 1.4. And again, the major difference was that bonding. We flip on over to page number 3, which is the summary of major components for the 2019-2020 tentative budget. I'm not going to read all of this, just going to highlight a few things here. The general fund budget, again, is estimated to be $921,789,746. The general operating fund is used to pay for our day-to-day operations of the district. Appropriations include a total estimated ending fund balance of $40,262,155, comprised of inventory, prepaids, restricted fund balance, state categorical fuel tax, assigned fund balance, and reserve for contingency. And our unassigned estimated fund balance for the end of 2020 will be $16.9 million. The minimum unrestricted balance required to meet our school board policy of 5% is $40,568,086. The budgeted unassigned ending fund balance of $18.9 million is 2.34%. So that's what we're advertising as a 2.34 ending fund balance budgeted. Remember that our lapse, that's primarily the difference in what we budget for salaries and our actual salaries, usually comes in between $15 and $20 million. That would push our projected ending fund balance to 4.34%. And as you remember, this past year, the board decided to give raises. And when we did that, we dropped our fund balance from about 5% down to 4%. Right now, I'm estimating our fund balance to be 3.9%. Although, again, it's tentative, and that could go up a little bit or go down a little bit over the next month. Special revenue, which is primarily our title funds and our food service budget, is estimated to be $112,202,637. Debt service, this was the other interesting thing. Although we bonded in June, our first payment is not until April. So our debt service budget is smaller than it will be next year at this time. But our debt service budget is $88,471,927. Skip over to the capital projects. We're estimating our budget to be $439,840,999. This represents $131,550,520 in anticipated revenue. That revenue is made up of impact fees, the half-cent sales tax, primarily, and the 1.5 discretionary millage. I'd like to point out that the PICO, the Public Education Capital Outlay, for school maintenance this year is $0. That's the first time in quite a few years. Now, this is the 8th year in a row that we will receive no PICO allocation for new construction. But generally, we've received about $3 to $4 million a year in maintenance, and the state is not handing that out this year. Internal service fund, that makes up our workers' comp, general and fleet liability, errors and emissions, boiler and machinery, and our employee group health insurance is estimated to be $148,879,994. We're going to move on to page number 5. This is the boilerplate language for the 1.5 mil. It outlines pretty much everything that we could possibly spend money on. The way this advertisement works is if we don't have this language in here, we won't be able to spend funds in a certain way. So this is not exactly everything we're going to do, but it's everything possible. So that's on page 5 and 6. We skip on over to page number 7. This is the final part of our advertisement on Saturday. And notice a proposed tax increase. Although our millage rates have continued to decline, we will collect more dollars this year in taxes. So that's why we have to advertise a tax increase. Last year, our tax levy brought in a total of $238,449,111. This year, proposed tax levy will bring in $248,625,507. As part of the FEFP program, this is the rates that the DOE has mandated that we hand out, and that allows us to receive $604,703,841 through that FEFP program. The required local effort has increased by 1.72% and represents approximately 6/10 of the total proposed taxes. Okay, number 8 is just kind of for your own information. This is sort of what we share with taxpayers quite often. Describes what a mill is. Also describes our homestead exemption. It gives the example if your home assessed value was $75,000 and you correctly filed and received the homestead exemption, the taxable value of your home would be $50,000 for the school district tax levy purposes. This is the value upon which the tax would be levied. If your home is $75,000, I'm going to skip down a little bit, and you receive a homestead of $25,000, taxable value of $50,000, your tax would be $304.30 for public education. The two different mills that we generally talk about are general operating millage and our capital outlay millage. I won't go into more detail there. I'm going to skip down to the total millage. So on page number 9 in the middle, capital outlay millage is 1.5 mils for the fiscal year 2019-2020, which represents $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed value. The total millage for fiscal year 1920 is 3.838 for the required local effort, 0.748 for our discretionary operating millage, for a total operating millage of 4.586. Added together with a capital outlay of 1.5, the total millage for fiscal year 1920 is 6.086 mils. How does this compare to last year? You can see that the millage has dropped by 0.165. Now, if you'll skip over to the last page, Mike had suggested I include this information. There's a graph on the back. You're used to seeing this graph. Kind of gives us the 10-year history of our millage rates and our taxable value. If you can see in 2013, at the height of the recession, we had lost a third of our taxable value. At that time, it was $25.4 billion. And then as the economy started to turn around, you can see a pretty good increase year over year. This year, our taxable values increased nearly 7%. But you can see how the state has continued to reduce our millage rates down to 3.838 this year. Now, that millage decrease of 0.165 is equal to $6.7 million. Put that in perspective, the cost of our 18-19 raises were $8.9 million. We and most other school and all the other school districts too have been advocating that the state leave that RLE at least flat. If you had a home of $250,000 assessed value, you had the $25,000 homestead exemption, your taxable value would be $225,000. The reduction in the 0.165 mils comes out to about $37 for the year, $3.09 for each month. That's sort of what that decreased millage is to an average homeowner family. Okay, let me skip over. Page number 10, Ms. Byrd will be asked to sign this letter to advertise in the paper this Saturday. Page number 11 is the advertising requirements, which is just how the ads need to show in the newspaper. And that gets us to our first resolution, which we'll ask for a motion in just a few minutes. But the resolution is, whereas the School Board of Polk County, Florida did pursuant to Chapters 200 and 1011 Florida statutes approve the tentative millage rates for the fiscal year July 1st, 2019 to July 30th, 2020. And whereas as the public hearing and in full compliance with Chapter 200 Florida statutes, the Polk County School Board adopted the tentative millage rates for fiscal year 1920 in the amount of required local effort, 3.838. It's proposed to raise $156,790,124. Capital outlay of 1.5 mils, estimated to raise $61,278,058. And our discretionary operating of .748, which is estimated to bring in $30,557,325. The total millage rate to be levied is 1.8% more than the rolled back rate. Now let's skip over to resolution number 2. Whereas the School Board of Polk County, Florida, under Chapters 200, 1011 Florida statutes, approved the tentative budget, approved tentative millage rates and the tentative budget for fiscal year 1920. And whereas the Polk County School Board set forth appropriations and revenue estimate for the budget for fiscal year 2019-20. Whereas at the public hearing and in full compliance with Chapter 200 Florida statutes, the Polk County School Board adopted the tentative millage rates and the budget in the amount of $1.7 billion, $690,942,130 for fiscal year 2019-20. And that's why we're here today. We're going to ask for that in just a moment. And I also wanted to point out that I gave out handouts, and I'll send this information electronically. The state released this information Friday afternoon. That's why we are usually not able to get this information to you any sooner. But you do have our tentative general fund budget that we'll talk about next week. And we'll talk about that next week. I won't get into it now.
Ms. Brown?
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to touch on the fund balance, because that is obviously very important. Jason and Dave Denbo, I ask them every month to project out the fund balance. And if you recall, every month we've been talking about 4.1. The other day, Jason came to me and said that as you know, our health plan has had issues. And for half of the year, we were about $2 million short. And so he asked me, should I move that? And we did move that. So that $2 million swing went from 4.1 to 3.9. So kudos to staff for projecting. And it's my fault that I moved that to not get the 4.1. But we needed to do that. It was 6 of one, half the dozen of another. We may make that up in the next 6 months, but we just wanted to have that it balanced through June 30. So that is on almost $1 billion budget. $2 million is pretty accurate, and actually they were right on, not for the health plan. But I wanted to mention that they'll be voting the millages next week. Right. They're just doing he was just reading those. You're just doing the ad. Okay, good.
Okay. So before we move on, Mr. Pitts, and before we have board questions, just a little procedural thing. I think we need a motion to accept the agenda. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda for this morning's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So please.
So then the next order of business would be on your agenda, item number 2, motion to accept the tentative budget for advertising. And then the third would be the motion to advertise Saturday for the July 30th public hearing.
So, Mr. Bridges?
Yes, before you do that, I would invite members of the public
Right.
who wish to address items on the
Yes.
agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
Yes,
So
sir.
first, though, we may have some board member questions. Mr. Townsend?
Specific to the advertisement, how much does that cost?
It cost about $1,200.
$1,200? Okay. Is there any other news organization other than the Ledger that fulfills this bill?
I'm gonna say that's, the Ledger is, has historically always done because it reaches the broadest audience.
There is some language that you have to go to the publication that reaches most of the citizens.
Okay.
And in our case, that's the Ledger.
Okay. For next year, I would like to explore the possibility of perhaps a different business organization. And I say this because the Ledger's editorial voice, the editorial page editor of the Ledger, is pretty hostile to public education. He's pretty hostile to teachers. He's pretty hostile to the concept of egalitarian public good. So I'm not terribly interested in having the public pay his salary. He's never been to a school board meeting. He's lazy, and I don't want to reward that with my taxpayer money or anybody else's. So I'm not going to stand in the way of it this year, but I would like us to explore alternatives for next. You know, and we'll see how things go. Another question. So just to be clear, they did not actually impose the rollback rate on us, but they reduced it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Can I make one comment and be done?
Certainly.
You know, I think what you see here is from the peak of the required local effort to where we are now is 1.6 mils. We've dropped 1.6 mils in what, 10 years? That's a lot of money each year. That is the reason that many other counties have already asked their voters to go out to referenda for mills. Certainly, they're the reason why we need to be discussing it and seeing what the options are. More importantly, the public needs to understand that is the Kelly Stargell tax. That is the Rick Scott tax. That is the Manny Diaz tax. That is the Richard Corcoran tax. That is the the Colleen Burton tax. That is the legislative delegation tax. They have made it impossible to fill that revenue gap that they've imposed on us without our citizens imposing it themselves. I think that's important for everyone to know. I don't even know what 1.6 mils off the top of my, that's what, $200 million probably. I mean, that's anyway. It's a ton of money. If they had just left the tax rates alone, so many of these discussions we wouldn't even be having. So anyway, that's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Ms. Fields?
Mr. Jason, Mr. Pitts, you only have the 10-year history. I would be interested in going back further, because if my memory serves me correctly, we've been dealing with this for almost from the beginning of when I came on the school board in 2002, as far as the millage rate being reduced each year. So I think in order to look at this realistically, we would need to go back beyond the 10 years to see exactly what that looks like.
Yes, ma'am, and I can go back to at least 2001. And it's also, want to point out that our 1.5 mils used to be 2, and that was reduced sometime in the mid-2000s. So
Yeah, but-
I'll be happy to send that to you.
Because I remember when we had other legislators and we had the same conversation with them, and it was the same answer. So I think in fairness, we need to go back and look at it beyond the 10-year span.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. So now, what I'm offering right now is questions from board members, because we'll have the motion, and then we'll have some comments a little bit in just a few minutes. So any questions of Mr. Pitts related to the presentation he just gave us? Ms. Cunningham?
I just want to say thank you. Y'all work very hard every year to set this up, and I know that it's a crystal ball at this point. As you said, it's very tentative as we go through it this morning, but thank you so much, because I know y'all spend an incredible amount of time trying to get as close as you can, and we'll be anxious to see what it looks like in the next 10 days. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you. I just would like to thank our finance staff who put in a lot of hours. We have just such a great team, and they deserve the thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Ms. Miller?
Just have a procedural question. Being that we have to advertise this on Saturday and it's a tentative budget, what is the procedure of notifying the public of when this changes? Or what, is this the one time that you do this?
Yes, there is one. Now, we've already advertised in the Ledger that these meetings were going to take place, but yes, this is the one time it's all a part of that trim timeline. So this is, we'll advertise for this, and then we'll advertise for the second public hearing in September when we move to adopt the budget. I'm not sure if that answered your question, though.
It does. I just think for transparency and community communication that we need to make sure we give them accurate, info. This is our tentative budget. This is what's happening. It will look different. I don't know that we're telling our story other than what the legislature and statute requires. Like, you're just going to, you know what I mean? I want to make sure that we are updating them on the processes or what this looks like in the end.
I think what the intent is, we will do the tentative, we'll go through that, and then there's 45 days to the final, and that is the time frame that public is to either get to the superintendent or the board, so changes could be made if at all. That's what that time frame is. It's from...
For us to take phone calls from this. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for board members? Okay, before we move to public comments, Mr. Bridges, I have two action items on the agenda, and these are both for advertising.
Correct.
Mr. Pitts mentioned the two resolutions. Are we voting on those today as well? No, just the
I believe
advertising.
today, all we're doing is approving the advertisement to be published. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. So this time, I would ask anyone who would like to come forward from the general public and offer comments about the tentative budget, please do so at this time. Okay? So seeing that we have no one to offer public comments, we'll go to our motions, and the first motion is approval to accept the 2019-2020 tentative budget for advertising. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, so the motion on the floor is approval to accept the 2019-2020 tentative budget for advertising. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The second item is approval to advertise the July 27, 2019 public hearing to be held no later than 5:01 p.m. on July 30th, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
I think it's no earlier.
Excuse me, no earlier.
Okay.
Thank you for
Just want
catching
to make
that.
sure we don't have to
Very
start by
important.
5:01.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? So the motion on the floor is to advertise July 27, 2019 as the public hearing date to be held no earlier than 5:01 p.m. on July 30, 2019. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there any other business before the board? In that case, this meeting is adjourned.